Inside out was my ornate gaze as I stared down a harmonious but opaque cascade of iridescent light. For as much as each color of my posters, each shade of my furniture, and each and every fabric of my sheets spread across that mattress with no frame beamed brightly, none of them were capable of outshining the other. There was an odd amount of order in a process that by any traditional understanding of the word ought to be seen as chaotic. Indeed, as my eyes melted in awe of the space that laid before me, a space I had seen altered not quite like that before, but in so many ways before, I couldn't help but notice how well it all melded together. My motor skills had no doubt declined. Even that is an understatement. And even then, in this milky haze of perception speckled and spaced, I could move. I could move with all of gravity's might set aside and in bed because it was night. Light as a feather, I was basking in it all right. Our titular protagonist, me, was under the influence of a little-known dissociative called DMXE, not to be confused with its conveniently named cousin MXE, widely sought after and missed by many. Rest in peace. Not an uncommon event for me in big 2022, the year I became one of you. But at this time, during this experience, I was becoming more like me, and less like you. I was no longer a wage laborer, the very strata of people that propelled me towards this and other drugs. In all my heartache and ruefulness aimed directly at a sense of grief that was in no small part caused by getting kicked off the dole, money that wasn't going to me in the first place anyhow, I took to experiences like this to escape. Except they weren't like this. Those experiences were a high after a long, sustained series of lows, in a person made of lows, whose baseline state of mind is so low, so downright in the dumps, one might not even call it a baseline but some sort of basement, if not a crawl space, of the mind, that is. I'll freely admit, and who knows, is this piece an admission that I still can't quit? That prior to this particular series of events, I fell into a ditch. Addiction, it's a bitch. But going 1 year strong, with my cock freshly gnawed off, in a trans sort of way, yes, this story is that gay, I took to something I knew. I thought it was the only way this bird, stuck in the nest at the federal government's behest, might have ever flew. Fuck grammar, too. With a bright shining offer from a one-man crew, manned by a chink named Karasu, this little birdie needed to shore up an M30 for fear of going hurdy-gurdy. So in short, to explain away me and this drug's rapport, I was a big pussy bitch and thought functioning in the adult world was impossible without an obvious stitch, one that was bound to come undone, because this stuff was meant for fun, not minimum wage at the point of a gun. Anyway, I exhaled. I was exalted from the ways of my recent past. I was myself again, showered with the present, the fact of freedom. And that was exactly what this experience in particular looked like. It was not a rotting, molten excuse for a trip, utilizing only a tiny portion of the substance's potential. It was a beauty to behold. Mine to behold. Shortly before I ingested whatever that amount of DMXE I ingested was, I downed a little pop of vodka I had and a little more later. A family friend was working on their bike outside our home. It was night. My parents were not home yet. We spoke as my inhibitions had been lowered. I helped dry the red paint on 2 flashlights meant to be taped on the back of the bike, and after some time passed, I helped him along the bridge to his home. I cannot begin to describe how beautiful the radiant glow of the purple street lamps dotting the bridge and oncoming road was in my lightheaded and euphoric state. Each step I took was a defiant step in the face of gravity. Giant steps are what I took, like I was walking on the moon. I finished walking him home. I walked more that night, though that part of my memory is distinctly more shot. What I do recall may have not been profound, but it was enmeshed in, shrouded in beauty. And for that reason, the events of what was otherwise a mundane day in my room and then walking at night stands so vividly and tall in my mind's eye. The overarching point I'm making here, if the sappy rhyming scheme at the beginning didn't make it obvious, is that drugs are best utilized in a context where they actually provide the least utility in an economic sense. There was nothing productive about that night, and for that reason, there was very little addictive about it as well. I was not inhaling a daily dose of de-stress serum, nor was I chronically fixated on abating the noticeable fixtures of my immediate concerns. Where wage labor is absent, so too is that invisible hand pushing us toward these deeply unhealthy tendencies that we feel are the only way to function in modernity. If existence is meant to be experienced, then its constituent parts ought to be consumed in their most unadulterated state, lest they consume you by mistake.